The Rings of Power is butter scraped over too much bread. Bilbo was right all along, and he was actually reviewing this series in the original Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. I don't want to be too mean with The Rings of Power as a series. I want to say that even if The Rings of Power was complete garbage, I would have still watched it just because I'm such a Lord of the Rings fan. I don't care. It can be the worst series ever. I would still watch it just because I'm such a sucker for Lord of the Rings. I just love Lord of the Rings. In this video, we'll review the entire Rings of Power series. As I said in my last review, I wanted to wait for these last 2 episodes before doing a final review and a final grading. I think the first 6 episodes are really, really weak. The last 2 episodes, well, especially the last episode, is great. So as I was watching the final episodes, I kept stopping because I was like, oh my god, how much time is left? Constantly. I think I stopped myself 3 times to check how much time was left, and it was always a lot of time. So I was like, holy moly, so much has happened. Stop. What? I still have 1 hour? Move forward. 20 more minutes. Stop. How much time? What? Still 40 minutes? It's like there was so much in the last episode of The Rings of Power. So that episode alone, for me, honestly, is an 8. You get to see Sauron, Galadriel, and finds out the rings are made out of nowhere in 1 episode. Which, you know, you can be against that. Maybe you don't like it. But I love how much happened in such a short amount of time. It was great. It was great because of that. Yeah, it's like so much happened. I think there was definitely a payoff for all the storylines of the first 7 episodes. Is it enough to redeem the entire series? No, I don't think so. If I have to judge the last 2 episodes, episode 7, not a great improvement. Episode 8, I freaking love it. There was not Elrond and the dwarf, which is the dynamic that I enjoyed the most throughout the series. But honestly, it wasn't a problem for me. Like, it wasn't a problem for me that in the last episode that dynamic wasn't around. It wasn't for me. I really enjoyed it. Like, everything happened in 1 episode, and that is actually my problem for the series as a whole, because if you make everything happen in 1 episode, that episode is gonna be awesome. But if it's an 8 episodes series, you have a lot to fill before that. You know, if we should actually title this series should be titled Galadriel and the Search for Sauron. Like, the making of the rings really take 1 episode. Just 1 episode of the entire series. The series is more about Galadriel trying to find Sauron, and it's revealed at the end that Sauron was actually there all along, and we kind of all knew that. But yeah, it's pretty weak as a series. If you judge it as a whole, yeah, it doesn't work for me. I feel like my problem is that I feel like the rest of the series was just dragging on. So in my mind, I was like, I wonder how they conceived this series, because to me it feels like the last episode is the best and it's a great end, but then you judge the entire series and there is so much wasted time. It's like the Meteor Man storyline is dragged on and on and on, and you feel like nothing is really happening. Every time you see the stranger and female Frodo, nothing is really happening. We just know that he's probably a wizard and that this idea gets dragged on and on and on and on. And is it Sauron or is it a wizard? No, it's clearly a wizard. There was never really a moment in which I thought it was Sauron. I think that's probably the weakest point of the series, is that they played too much with the identity of Sauron. Like, we know that in that period of time, Sauron was a shapeshifter, so it makes sense to play on that theme. But I think they just drag it too much. They just dragged it way too much. Like the entire storyline of the Meteor Man and female Frodo, I feel like was so long for no reason. The entire Numenor as well, like I feel like that's really dragged on too for no reason as well. Like I get it that they wanted to do this final ending in which Isildur is missing and it's revealed that Sauron is the guy that was next to Galadriel the whole time, but it's just so dragged on. I feel like the first 7 episodes there is so little story and everything is placed in the last episode. Bilbo literally called it butter scraped over too much bread. Or maybe I think it would be more correct to say butter only on one side of the bread, really, because I feel like all the butter, all the good stuff is in the last episode and the other 7 is just build up for that. The problem is that this build up doesn't really work because I think maybe choosing I think I agree. I heard a review, someone said that they should have based the series on Elrond rather than Galadriel, and I think that would have probably be better because I think Elrond and the relationship with the dwarf worked best. Yeah, Elrond is actually a pretty interesting character because when I started the series I really didn't like the actor. I hated it, I have to be honest. I just hate the actor choice because he looks nothing like the Elrond we saw in the 3 movies, the Lord of the Rings movies. So I really didn't like it. But as time went on, I really liked the performance. So even if it didn't look at all like the Elrond we know, I really liked the performance, and I think it's a great performance from the actor who played Elrond. I think if they based it more on Elrond and less on Galadriel, it would have worked better, I think. And it makes sense. It would even, like, it doesn't really make sense to take a character like Galadriel, who is a elf, which we know very little about from the movies, and just transform her into a warrior, which is a storyline that, why? Like, literally, it's not building. My problem is that it's not building on what we already know from the movies. So it's like all of a sudden you have to believe that Galadriel was a warrior and she was fighting and she wasn't the wise fairy figure that we know. No, it's a completely different character. Let's start from new. Pam. This is always a weak choice, always, to rewrite a character from zero. It reminds me of how they rewrote Luke Skywalker in the new Star Wars. You know, Luke Skywalker used to be hope, and the new Star Wars series is the exact opposite. He represents anything but hope. He lost hope. And it's like this rewriting of the character that I don't think it ever works from a story perspective, to just rewrite a character right off the bat, like complete change. It's really hard to make that work because in general, I think if we already know something about the character, we just want to know more. We want to develop the good stuff. We want to explore the good stuff. So you kind of want to take the best and make it even better. And they did not do that with Galadriel at all. They did that though with Elrond and with the dwarf, because I think the reason why that storyline works so well is because everyone loves the relationship between Gimli and Legolas. It's one of the highlights of the original movies. It's one of the best parts. So to take that and translate it into a new relationship, which is Elrond and Durin, this other dwarf, and explore that even more, I think it's great. In the movies, we don't really get to explore that storyline that much. So much is going on. Yeah, we do get the competition between Gimli and Legolas, who kills more orcs, and we do get a big payoff at the end when they talk. What about, the famous line, "Never thought I would die next to a elf," and Legolas replying, "What about next to a friend?" Yes, I can do that. That's the final payoff. But it's not really explored more than that. More like it's just a side. It's just a subplot of a bigger plot in the movies. It would make so much sense to take that subplot and use it as the main plot of this series. I think if they use that subplot and make Durin and Elrond a more important part of the story, I think it would have worked way better. Because you're taking something that the audience already love, that I love, and I assume many others do, and expanding on that. That subplot all of a sudden is explored more. It has more. You make that subplot develop more. You can see it more. And it's an important part of the story too, because it was like that. Dwarves and elves at one point were very friendly, especially in those times. And it makes sense because Mithril has such an important role in the story. It turns out that Mithril is sort of the catalyst for the making of the rings. Yeah, this choice of making Galadriel the main character and just transforming her doesn't make sense. Maybe it would have worked if they took the original Galadriel that we all love and built on that. So maybe Galadriel is this wise figure guiding everyone, but not just transforming and rewriting a characters. It's very hard to make that work. I think there are examples in which it works, but you have to give a reason for that. Like, it needs to be a strong reason, and I think they did it too fast. They just introduced that she lost her brother, and it was too fast. There was not enough build-up. It's a problem. It's like this is the exact problem that Thor: Love and Thunder had, and I talked about it in a previous video. The problem of Thor: Love and Thunder is that you have to do all this build-up with Jane and Thor, because Jane was never there, and Ragnarok works so well, and Jane wasn't there at all. So to bring back this character means to rewrite it. And they rewrote Jane in Thor: Love and Thunder, and they really tried to make it work, but it just didn't. Because it's very hard to take a character, rewrite it as a hero now, as a she-Thor, and make it. It's like very hard. For me, that didn't work very well in Thor: Love and Thunder, and I think about Star Wars as well for Luke Skywalker. And it's very hard to make it work. There are cases in which it does. Like I think about Evangelion, which is another series that I watched. There, it kind of works because, for example, for the characters of Rey in that series, character dies, come back, it's a different person, which makes sense. This actually happens in Lord of the Rings too. Gandalf dies and he comes back. But think about it. That's a character that is being rewritten, but not really. Like when Gandalf dies as Gandalf the Grey and comes back as Gandalf the White, it's a different character, but he's kind of the same character, isn't it? The character is not rewritten deeply. And I believe Ian McKellen, who plays Gandalf, talks about a little bit about this, and he prefers Gandalf the Grey compared to Gandalf the White. And Gandalf the White comes across as a bit more maybe arrogant or proud compared to to Gandalf the Grey, but the character is not really rewritten. It's the same character, but the character changed, and it is motivated because he dies. He dies and is sent back to complete the mission as Gandalf the White. So technically Gandalf the Grey died and he's sent back, and now it's slightly different, but everyone recognizes Gandalf the White as the other Gandalf. They call him Gandalf. And I would say by essence, he is still the wise Gandalf that we know. So that's a change of character that works. I don't think it worked for Galadriel. They changed the character too much with too little reason for that to work. In the case of Gandalf, instead, from the original movies, that is a change of character. It's not Gandalf the Grey anymore. But it works because the reasons are different, and in that context it does work. In the context of Galadriel, it does not, and that's on the shoulders of the writers, I think. So yeah, the Rings of Power is butter scraped over too much bread, or butter all in one side of the bread, because that's really what it feels like. I feel like they had a good story. They should have probably kept working on the story for another 5 months, 1 year to feel more, to make the story more meaningful. Because the problem with the Rings of Power is that really the first 7 episodes, the only storyline that is interesting is Elrond and the dwarf Durin. That's the only storyline in 7 episodes. And there are 4 storylines going on at the same time, and only one of those 4 is actually interesting. So they should have really worked that better. They should have probably kept the story more focused. As I said in my previous video, the story is just too messy, not enough focus, and they should have make it more meaningful. Another problem is that the making of the rings happen in 1 episode, and that's great. You make a great episode, but it's a double-edged sword, because at the same time you can't call a series The Rings of Power if it's just 1 episode in which the rings are basically made. You know, it's so fast. Everything happens in 1 episode. What's going on? So that's a bit of a problem. They should have probably built it in phases. Everything feels a bit rushed in the last episode. Everything happens so fast. And what about the rings? Someone already, some other reviews brought this up. Where are the rings of the men and the dwarves? Originally, they were all created in one place. So we don't really know that. I feel it's a very rushed ending. It's a great ending, but it's a double-edged sword, because if you make a series in which everything happened in 1 episode, you really have to fill all the rest with great material, and they did not do that. So I don't think the last episode redeemed the entire series. More happened in the last episode than the rest of the series. I feel like, nothing really happened in the rest of the series. The last one really had more than all the rest. So I believe I rated this series around a 6 in the previous review, but I was hoping for the rest of the series to redeem everything else. And as much as I loved the last episode, I don't think it redeemed the series. So it's still a pretty weak series overall. Overall, for me, it's between a 5 and a 6. Still, I think it's a great series. And honestly, even if it was complete garbage, I would still watch it, because I'm too much of a fan of Lord of the Rings. But they definitely, if they want to do a season 2, they definitely have many things to do. And learn more from this season, so they can make a stronger season for the second season. So they should learn everything and make the second season way better, because the first one was pretty weak overall. It's between a 5 and a 6.5. If I want to really be generous, that's the range for me of the series. That's at least what I think about it. But what do you think about it? Let me know down below in the comments. Let me know what you think. If you watch it, if you just listen, let me know what you think down below in the comments. And that's about it. And I'll see you in the next review. And good night. See you.